How you guys doing? Welcome, welcome, welcome to a important Facebook Live that I'm doing here from my office in the Rio Grande Valley in Texas. And if you guys just give me a moment, I'm trying to find my live. Here we go. I'm going to go ahead and share this onto my regular page. If I can. I don't know if I can, actually. Looks like it's not letting me do it for some reason. Just give me a second. I'm not the best at I don't do these things all the time like a lot of people do. So, I'm working on it. That is definitely not what I want to do. So, well, anyway, we're just going to hope that the right people find it. Okay, how about that? So, I've been in an interesting situation for the past 9 months. It's hard to believe that it's been 9 months. I mean, literally, my wife and I could have had a baby. Not that we're in the market to have a baby, but we could have literally had children by now. And it's been one of the most tremendously stressful situations that I've ever had, that I've ever been through in the church. And if you could share, it's important that people hear what I have to say, I believe. Also, if you could just tell me if you can see that, or if you can hear this or not. I'm not sure that you can hear me real well. I don't know that I've even done a live from this room, so I don't know how the data is. So if you just let me know that. But as you share, I'm just going to tell you a little bit. First of all, I'm not the one, and in any regards, at any stretch of the imagination, has any business exposing people or talking about people's failures or sins, because I myself have had many failures in my life. I've had many sins. Many of you know, you've read my book, and I've had probably sinned more than most people will ever sin their entire life before I was even 21. And that's not a point of pride for me. It's just a point I'm trying to make, that I have no business judging. And so when God presents things to us in these regards, you really have to take a look and make sure you check your own heart and different things. So when I was presented this particular situation, and most of you probably already know, I'm referencing the Todd Bentley. At points it's been called the Todd Bentley process. At points it's been called the Todd Bentley issue, and now I'm going to call it the Todd Bentley fiasco. But I'm just going to take you guys through how I was involved and what happened, and mainly because I didn't want to be involved anymore. I made a statement a while back that said this is going to be my last statement on it. But this is kind of like a principality, man, and it refuses to let you go. And it kind of drags you back into it. And by the way, I'm not going to be answering any questions live. Not for any other reason than because I'm ADHD, and if I don't stick to script once I start going, it's going to be a train wreck for everybody. So, but I will answer questions, and I would ask you not to be condescending to anybody on the party here, the watch party or whatever, the live. I want you to be respectful. I want you guys to keep a kingdom attitude through this. I don't want there to be any kind of backbiting, name calling, stone throwing, any of that on this feed, please. Let's keep it kingdom, amen. But through this 9 months, something extraordinary happened to me, which is I lost my entire ministry, and it's been so difficult. It's been such a phenomenon, I don't even know how it happened. Basically, I never sought to expose anybody. All I sought was truth. For me, all I've ever wanted in my life is just truth. You know, I had enough lies and manipulation in my entire life, and I've lied enough and manipulated enough to last me a lifetime as well. And all I wanted was truth. And through this process, through seeking truth and trying to be a person of peace and trying to play the middle road when it came to a lot of different things, I come to find out that I've lost my ministry. Now, truly, I think everybody knows that nobody can steal my ministry. You know, God gave me the ministry that I have in my life, and this is ultimately temporary. But it shows you that the ministry world, I don't know if you know this, but if you desire to go into ministry, I'm going to tell you right now, it is stinking ugly. It is an ugly place with ugly people that are out in the spirit of competition, and there's so much backbiting and just people keeping logs of your wrong to where they can use it against you and weaponize it against you at certain points, and it is just an ugly, ugly place with ugly stuff. Now, I have chosen in my life to stop focusing on that. You know, early on in my ministry, I was very zealous. I was very much a heresy hunter in a lot of ways. And I decided I did not want that in my life anymore because there was no joy in being a heresy hunter. There was no joy that I found in my life picking apart other people's theology and their wrongs and laying them out and being that judgmental person. I didn't want that for my life because I really feel like it's a very downward slope. Once you start being a heresy hunter, it'll take you into a very dark place. And I was able to crawl out of that, but not very many people can do it. So with that being said, I'm not the guy that ever set out to be a judgmental person. All I wanted was truth. And why did I want truth? It's because I was involved in a project. For 3 years, I made a movie on the subject of raising the dead. And twice, I encountered people that had very questionable things that came up on them during the process of me filming, where I had to answer to God. I had to answer to people that I had in the movie, and I had to answer, ultimately to myself. Are these people that I want to endorse by having them in a movie? And so what happened was, first of all, a year and a half ago-ish, I had to actually take somebody out of my movie because of different things that were happening in their life, and I never named them publicly. I never did that, and I still haven't. And it's not a fun thing to do. So I definitely didn't want to do it again. But then in my traveling, so my relationship with Todd Bentley was this. I love Todd Bentley. I respect Todd Bentley. As a matter of fact, I used to be, many people know the story. When I was a heresy hunter, I was very adamantly against Todd Bentley. I used to have a heresy hunting style blog that was way before people were really doing vlogs a lot. And I had tens of thousands of people that would read this stuff, and I'd write how Todd Bentley was a heretic and all these different, and I believed a lot of people were heretics, and then God moved in my life. And then I had a restoration time with Todd where we talked about it, and my wife got healed of cancer at a meeting of Todd Bentley's. And so we loved Todd Bentley, not based on anything other than just, I loved him as a person, I believe that he, when that report came out the other day about Todd, I truly believe what they wrote, that Todd was and is still a very gifted person. And the gifts are without repentance. God gives us those gifts, and it doesn't, one of the things a friend of mine told me, who he was actually doing worship at Jim Bakker's place right before Jim Bakker got caught up, and he had asked his mentor at the time, he said, how is it that God can still use people even if they're in all this sin? And his mentor told him that it's never about the person, it's always about the people. And so God will use people regardless of what they're in to reach the people that are coming to see God. And I believe that's true. And so I believe Todd was and is still gifted. And that's why people, they're still going to secret place and they're still being touched, because it's God that's doing it. It's not Todd. So, with that being said, I traveling in ministry. My wife and I traveled, and my team traveled basically 600 days over 2 years, and in many of those churches, they're actually in networks where Todd would flow in and out of, and I would flow in and out of, and Stephen would flow in and out of. Many of the people that have been involved in this flow in and out of the same church networks and places, and people would begin to give me stories. And I would hear stories, and I'd be like, that's just what people do. They hear stories, and they inflate them. And I really didn't take a whole lot of stock in it. But then I was in Ohio about a year and a half ago, and I was doing a series of meetings in Ohio, and a fellow revivalist, evangelist, whatever he was, whatever you call him, prophet, came to me and said, hey, look, man, excuse me, this girl is bringing me these text messages today, and they're all from Todd Bentley, and they're very inappropriate. And I didn't see him. I didn't want to see him. I didn't ask to see him. My exact answer to him was, take them to Todd. I truly believe in the Matthew process of taking an accusation to a brother. And so I said, take it to Todd. He said, I don't have a way to take it to Todd. I literally gave him Todd's phone number. I said, no, take it to Todd. And he did take it to Todd, and Todd shot it down and said, nah, man, that's not what it was at all. And he had whatever he said about it. I can't remember, something about it, but he shot it down. Not very long after that, we're in Houston, Texas, or we're actually in kind of around the Austin area, and we stayed a few days at some former supporters of ours, partners of ours, and they came to me, and they said, hey, look, we didn't want to tell you this, but, you're around Todd a lot, and you guys go to a lot of the same places, and, Todd, he was texting my sister inappropriately, and I'm just like, oh my God. So within just a short amount of time, this was probably within a month or 2 months of each other, maybe. So within that short amount of time, 2 different people came to me about these text messages. Excuse me. And I thought, oh, this isn't good. So what we actually, and I was on my way, by the way, back to New York, where we had an extended revival. I think we were in revival in New York for 16 weeks or something like that. I left for 1 weekend to go to Texas and then go back. Maybe 3 or 4 days, something like that. But anyway, when we were going back, we were actually going back. It was me, my son, and my spiritual son, Neil. We're heading back to New York, where we're meeting Todd at Revival Harvest America, New York. And I'm going there with these stories fresh in my head. And I'm like, my God, what do I do with this? And so I didn't know what to do, except for when I got there, Stephen Powell was there. And Stephen Powell has been one of my best friends for, 4 or 5 years. I love him dearly. He's a great man of God. I love him. And so after the first night, after the VIP dinner, Stephen and I and my son and Neil actually went out to Tim Hortons and just to chat. And I just laid it out to him. I said, man, I don't know what you think about this, but this is what I've been told over the last month, and I don't know what to do with this. And let me tell you something. This was Stephen at the time. Stephen adamantly was against it. He said, look, I don't believe it. It's hard for me to believe. Now, Stephen didn't call me a liar, but he didn't believe the stories. He was very much against it. Now, at the time, by the way, Stephen was just going through his Bethel fiasco, where he had somebody, and let me set the record straight. To my understanding, Stephen never outright said, God is burning down Bethel, this is what it is. To my understanding, Stephen was asked a question directly from a minister in Brazil or South America about whether or not he believed that these things could be related. And his answer was, I don't know, but it could be because of some false teachings, and this is what I don't agree with. He never said that God is burning it down. To my understanding, now somebody might have evidence to prove otherwise, and it's not my fight, it's not my battle. I'm just telling you this is my story. This is what I know. This is what I remember. And so at the time he was going through that, and you know, there were some things that were red flags for me, you know, with Todd in relationship to Stephen. Todd did say some things that were probably humiliating to him at that event. He did pull one prophet up, said this is a real prophet, and that's Stephen Powell over there. He's still a learning prophet. I thought that was probably a little humiliating for a guy to have to hear something like that. But anyway, he didn't believe it, and I dropped it, and I didn't say anything about it for the duration of the rest of the summer and you know, on into the next year. And so let me just skip ahead. So over basically from January to May of last year, so a couple of things started to happen. One was I received an anonymous email, and in this email, it had some questionable things about Todd being involved sexually with interns and asking sexual favors and for money and different things like that, and trading pictures and some different things of his wife. And it was hard for me to believe, you know, because I'm like, why would somebody put themselves out there like that? So I didn't really take much stock in it. I figured it might have been somebody trying to take Todd down because they knew that he was in my movie, and those things happen. You know, people have a bone to pick with somebody. They don't agree with them. You know, it could have been the NAR people. I mean, who knows? You know, but then people started asking questions. You know, I'm traveling around. People started asking questions. I'm like, man, this isn't making sense. And then somebody came to my wife with a story about Lindell, Texas. And in this story, there was an encounter that happened where Todd was making out with somebody, and then there was an alleged sexual exchange with a assistant. And that story came to me, and it was pretty credible. I was like, wow, I don't know what to do with this. And so I left Texas, and I went to California for a week, and I had asked Stephen about it. I said, Stephen, somebody told me this story, and I want to know, do you think that Todd could be capable of something like that? And the reason is, I wasn't trying to backbite and rumor and talk about Todd. I was talking to somebody I considered a wise counsel person in my life, Stephen. And the reason it was important to me is because I'm getting ready to release a movie that I believe is going to be groundbreaking for the entire kingdom of God. And whoever is in that movie, I'm endorsing them. So my purpose for asking somebody who's that I consider to be wise counsel was to say, hey, am I making a mistake? Do I need to pull him out of this movie? What do you think? So Stephen took it, and he went to some people with it. Now, I didn't know he was going to do that. I had no idea that was going to take place, but it did. Now, on that same trip to California, I drove to Lancaster, California, just to meet with Todd. We went to the green room. It was just me and him in the green room, and I said, look, man, I'm getting these stories, I'm getting these emails about you and some, infidelity and things with interns. And Todd adamantly denied it to me. He said, look, man, all that stuff is old. It's all repented of, and it's water under the bridge. Just people trying to blackmail me and destroy me. Now, when he told me that, I had no idea that there were recent allegations, more recent than Lakeland. I didn't know that there were things from 2012 or 13 or whatever. I had no idea. So I literally was like, okay, well, if you're telling me that this stuff is from Lakeland, then it's from Lakeland. Moving on. So from California, from that moment, I went down to Louisiana, and I was sitting in David Hunter's house when this stuff really started to break. David had me come down and do some meetings. I think we did, I don't know, maybe a week of meetings or something. I can't remember how long we were there, but we were there for a while. And that whole entire time, it was like we were under constant gunfire. Just, it was just the dam had broke, and rumors were flying, and stories were flying, and accusations were flying, and we were right in the middle of it. And because I had the movie, I was under the gun. I had people from the movie calling me, asking me what I was going to do about it. I had people from my movie that were threatening to pull out. I mean, it was just insane. I was literally, as I found myself many times, in a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. It didn't matter what I decided to do. I was going to make somebody mad. And during that time, the name came to me from somebody about Joshua Frey and Charles Chandler. That ended up being a point of interest to people. And so Stephen called this guy and recorded him. Now, come to find out, it was illegal for him to record him. He shouldn't have recorded him, but he did. But he didn't know. I'll tell you, for anybody that's wondering, it wasn't premeditated. Stephen did not premeditate this situation. He did not know that it was illegal to record. And there's no way I'll ever believe that Stephen thought it was illegal to do it. He didn't know. But he just did what he thought he needed to do. He recorded a conversation that maybe he shouldn't have recorded. And it was done. Now, come to find out that this reporter named Charles Chandler had been trying to blackmail Todd for years. I'm probably going to get in trouble for using names, but here's the deal. My whole life is over in ministry. It's ruined already. People have been trashing me and blackmailing me for 9 months on both sides of it. And so what difference does it make if I throw the names around at this point? It doesn't make a difference. I try to play the middle road and be friends to everybody, just to be used and abused and left with nothing and not even knowing where the money's going to come to pay my light bill. So Charles Chandler was a reporter that apparently had broke this story in 2013 to Michael Brown. And Michael Brown has held this information about this young intern over Todd's head for, 6 years or whatever. So it was just a nightmare that happened. I don't believe that Stephen ever intended to break the law on that end. But that's something Stephen will have to talk about. So right after that happened, well, I guess I got to back up one step, because one step is that, or maybe 2 steps. After I got back from California, Stephen was in Pennsylvania, and Stephen was sitting down with lunch with a pastor, and the pastor had asked Stephen about Todd, and it was unprovoked, it was unsolicited, and it was just a thing where he said, look, there's a member of my church that was solicited by Todd, and they really felt like they were abused and dishonored by Todd. And Stephen's just like, wow, really? And so basically the girl came in the next day and did a taped testimony with Stephen, and it turns out that the girl that gave the taped testimony is the original girl that I heard about a year and a half before that. And so it kind of had come full circle, and it was just there. So then following that, Stephen had a dream. And in this dream, he was in a courtroom in heaven. And in this dream, I was there with him. And basically I came up and I shook him. And when I shook him, I said, you need to start acting more like the Apostle Paul. And so recently the story's been going around that Stephen said he had an encounter with Paul, and now he is Paul. That's not exactly what happened. That's not what the dream was. That's not what the encounter was. That's the encounter, is that I came up, I shook him, I said, you need to start acting more like the Apostle Paul. And he took that from the dream, being the fact that he believes that I'm apostolic, that I was like, look, you need to start acting more apostolic. And so from that dream, he said, look, I believe that God has ordained me to take this on. And my position the whole time has always been, Stephen, if you believe that God has ordained you to take this mission on, then that's between you and God, and you're going to have to be resolute in making the decisions to do it. And because honestly, I don't believe God ordained me to take it on. Obviously, I should have listened to my coverings and the people in my life 9 months ago when they told me not to have anything to do with it, because they probably knew that I was going to end up losing everything over it, and I did. I should have listened. So, let me see where I'm at. So basically, at that point, the report that everybody talks about, the 30-page plus report, it began. And Stephen gathered information, and he followed leads, and people came to him, and one lead would lead to another. And at that time, I was listening. So Stephen would bring me information, because based on, I was still trying to consider, I hadn't even decided whether I was taking Todd out of my movie or not. And every day that he would bring me stuff, I would take it to Todd. I would message Todd and be like, hey man, what is this? And Todd would be like, oh, there's nothing to it. And I would talk to Todd's guy in his office, Shaney, and he'd be like, this is a nightmare. And what Todd kept telling me, he said, look, my covering is Rick. Go to my covering. He will cover me. So I messaged Rick Joyner. I sent a message, and again, I'm probably shooting myself, but at this point, it doesn't matter. I went to Rick. I sent him a message. I said, look, I have a movie that's coming up. I'm supposed to have my premiere in July, and I've got to know, are you covering Todd on this stuff? Is he in the clear? Did he do this stuff? Do you know about it? Somebody please give me the tools to defend him, because I'm getting shot at for even the question of him even being in my movie at this point. And I got no response. Apparently he takes a sabbatical, and whatever he was doing on the sabbatical was obviously more important than my movie. And so nothing. And then finally, after about a month and a half or 2 months later, I did get a message from his office that said he was going to look into it, and that was it. But I did call. I talked to his assistant, a lady. I can't remember her name right now. But and David Hunter knows, because David Hunter was with me when I made the call. I offered to fly into Fort Mill and sit down with Rick and go through all the evidence at that point, and let's call on it. Let's dig this stuff up, and let's figure out what is fact and what is fiction. Because I needed to know, man. I needed to know. Am I putting somebody I shouldn't put in my movie? So there's that. So the report began. That happened. I continually talked to Todd. Todd denied. He said, go to Rick. I went to Rick. I talked to the assistant. Rick did relay back through his assistant. Yeah, he appreciated it, but not at this time. But I also talked to Shaney consistently through this process. And Shaney was concerned all the time. He said, look, nobody's ever going to believe that I didn't know. He said that stuff all the time. And I got to tell you, I love Shaney. I loved his heart. I think he was really concerned about Todd. But I'll tell you this, that Shaney 100% admitted to me that this stuff about Todd, with the interns was 100% true. He admitted to it. He said he knew about it. Right there in the early stages, there was a revivalist that came to me and told me that he had a story that Todd had advanced another young revivalist that had been an intern for a sexual favor. Shaney told me he knew about that as well. Now, he didn't say that that was true. He just said that he knew about the allegation, that it had come up several times through other people. And that allegation continued to circle over and over and over. And I don't know whether it was ever confirmed or not confirmed, but it was out there. But anyway, I can just feel the eyes on me that people are so mad. But it is what it is. I'm telling the truth. This is my story. This is how I saw it happen. I'm telling the exact truth. Love covers, but love also tells the truth. And this is the truth. So, here we are. So at that point, I had made kind of the conversation with Stephen that, look, Stephen, you need to try to bring some people in that are probably more qualified um, than us. You know, people that are bigger leaders, people that can speak into this from a platform that we can't. Look, I'm not dumb. You know, I get it. This is a platform that required something way larger than us, and you know, I had thought that maybe Bill Johnson could weigh in, or Shayon could weigh in, or you know, and then the name Patricia King came up, but none of us had ways to get to these people. And then I thought, well, what if I was to get to Brent Borthwick, because I had Brent Borthwick's phone number and I knew him. He's a pastor in Canada, and I respect Brent Borthwick. I did then, and I do now. I know there's some stories circulating through David Hunter. Those are his stories. I'm not saying they're true, and I'm not saying they're false, because I don't know. I haven't seen the evidence from David. David has stories, he has evidence, and he'll present that as he sees fit. But I can only speak to what I know, and that's all I'll speak to. So Brent started to speak with Stephen and started to coach Stephen, and he took Stephen's report, and he then took it to Patricia King, and that's kind of how that thing all kind of came into play. Now, I also want to clear up one little point. I really like Michael Fickus. I don't know him. Stephen had kind of turned me on to his teachings a couple years ago, or maybe a year and a half ago or something, and I always enjoyed him. He's a great teacher. I think that his heart, all the time, as far as I know, is right. I don't know the evidence that he knows that makes him line up on whatever side that he's lined up on, and it's none of my business. But I will say I did listen to his live stream a couple days ago, and there was one thing that out of all of it that I disagreed with, and that was that, and I can only speak to this from the angle of what I know. Stephen told me, I gave a copy of the report to Michael Fickus because I want him to get it to Rick Joyner, because Michael Fickus works for Rick Joyner. Now, I don't think that that's exactly how Michael conveyed it. So either that story didn't happen the way Stephen told me, or Michael's not remembering it the way it happened. So I want to say that my understanding was Stephen Powell did not give that report to Michael Fickus as a way of kind of creating a rumor or gossiping about Todd. Is more about, hey, you work for Rick. Rick supposedly can cover him in this stuff. We want to sit down with Rick. Can you get this to him? And that was my understanding. Now, if that's not the way it happened, that's between Michael and Stephen. But that's the way I knew it to happen. So let me look here. Now at this time, I want to say, so at this time, Todd and I always had very cordial conversations. And as a matter of fact, I even shot some rumors down. We followed out some and so here's the thing. So for people that think that I was part of this investigation, let me clear this up. I was part of the early portion of this thing because, and if you go back and you read my statements from August, and you read my statements from a few weeks ago, and you line those up with what I'm saying right now, my story hasn't changed. My interest in this in the beginning was because I needed to know whether or not I was endorsing somebody in my movie that I shouldn't. That was it. And so what happened was, and by the way, my interest is also for the truth, and my interest is also for victims. You know, obviously we need to stand up for victims. So, but at that point, I didn't truly, you know, it was kind of like this on whether or not are there victims, are there not victims, or you know, are these credible? We didn't even know how to pursue that. So now Todd had been nothing but great to me. You know, even through this process, as I took allegations to him, you know, it had to be hard for him to hear this stuff. He was nothing but great to me, and eventually what he did was he said, you know what, Derrick, I hate seeing you go through this, so I'm just going to pull out of the movie so you don't have to make the hard call to pull me out, and you can just be done. And to this day, I just want to say that that was a great gift that he gave me by pulling out, because it means I didn't have to pull the trigger and pull him out myself. Now, I was still listed at the time. I was still listed as one of the keynotes at Revival Harvest America in Los Angeles, because many of you know I'm majorly plugged into Los Angeles, and I at that time I did pull out of Revival Harvest America. I just didn't think it was wise for me to be on that stage when all this was going on. Now there was a point of conversation that I sabotaged Revival Harvest America. I don't know. If you want to call what I did sabotage, then I guess that's up to you. I just spilled water on me. It's up to you, but I'll tell you exactly what I did, and you can decide. I had one pastor that asked me about what was going on, and I told him the whole thing, and the reason was because he was plugged in to Revival Harvest America. He was my friend. I went to his church and preached often in the high desert, and I felt like, man, if it was my church and I was supposed to be plugged in and my entire church be involved in something, I would at least want to know the facts as they were, so then I could decide. Whether or not I wanted to be involved or not. And so when he asked me, I told him the truth. I did not send him the report. Somebody else sent him the report. Stephen sent him the report, not me. He continued to kind of make contact with me to ask me my thoughts on it, and I would continue to tell him my thoughts that well, I don't know about you, but I can't be involved in it. There was one other pastor, and also kind of in the high desert area in California, that a good friend of mine, and he has a small church, and I just did not want them to be involved in the controversy if it popped, because my understanding at the time was that I kept being told that there was 6 or 7 separate investigations going on, and we were told things like the national news was going to pick it up, and I was just trying to protect some people that I love. And so I told them if I were them, I would think about it. But what I told them, I said, call your covering and you ask them what you should do. I didn't say pull out. I said, you call your covering, you ask them what you should do. And they ended up pulling out, and somehow the story started getting circulated that I stole all the food from RHA, and I don't even know how you can steal the food from RHA, but that I tried to sabotage it. Not true. 100% zero truth to that. I did not do that. And then somehow the report got back to some of Todd's leaders that I sent that report out to. I can't remember at the time, 190 some different pastors or whatever. And the truth is that I sent the report to 3 leaders that I trust, that speak into my life, to get advice on. One, I was feeling bad about Todd getting pulled out of the movie. I wanted to hear from somebody that was on a different level than me, whether or not I did the right thing or not. Now, one of those leaders took that report and they blasted it out to a bunch of people. You know what? Maybe I didn't use good discernment on who I sent it to, but they were doing the same thing, I guess, that anybody might do, which was they sent it to people who were connected, and they felt like there was credibility to the report, and they wanted to warn him. So if I did wrong, I repent. I guess what would you do if you were a leader? So again, I've lost my whole ministry over this thing, so what do I have to lose by saying I did something wrong? Amen? So at this time, Stephen was getting close to Patricia. Patricia was pulling Stephen in. I had kind of lost my main focus of even being involved. Patricia kind of didn't want me to know any information, so Stephen started guarding, information that he had, and I was on basically a need-to-know basis, and I guess at the time I didn't need to know. So I didn't know a lot that was going on from there on out, unless it kind of became a big deal or something. But what ended up happening, let me get to the point where Stephen went public. So at Revival Harvest America, I think Todd made a crucial mistake, which was, by the way, when I went to Todd, I feel like I completed, Matthew, the process. I went to him, he denied it. I feel like that. I know some people don't feel like that, and that's up to you. It's not for me to judge at this point. There's people with a higher pay grade than me that decide whether or not that was it. And also, there were many times during that first couple months where we tried to sit down with Todd. I was going to come as a middleman between Todd and Stephen, because that's the kind of gifting I have, is to be a person of peace and to be somebody who mediates. And Todd pulled out, to my understanding. He didn't want to have the meeting. So my understanding is Stephen did try to go to him. Todd pulled out. So Todd stood on the stage at Revival Harvest America, and I believe he made a crucial mistake. He kind of came forward with a little bit of the stuff that was circulating, but he never said really what it was. And then he said something that was a big slap in the face, I believe, to Stephen and to anybody that considered themselves a victim, which was, hey, Rick told me to do this, and he said it wasn't even important enough for him to even read the report. And by the way, Bill Johnson thinks the same thing. Now, I don't think that Bill Johnson probably said that, and I don't know whether Rick did. I don't know Rick. But I can tell you this, that was a big slap in the face to Stephen. And to say, hey, I don't care what you say. I don't care what's out there. Here it is. And apparently, Doug Addison and I can't remember the other guy that was there, but they kind of rebuked the situation, rebuked Todd, and for having them even involved in RHA after that. But I don't know. You have to go back and look at that yourself. So, following that, Stephen had received word, and I don't remember where he received this word from, but he had received word that Rick was going to go public and basically destroy him on a live stream. And Stephen got advice from his attorney. Now, I've never talked to his attorney. I wasn't on the inside of that stuff. I can only tell you what he told me, but Stephen told me that his attorney advised him to go first. And in the world, that's called law at first. You set the narrative. And so, when the reality is Todd set the narrative when he did that, but he didn't give any information. So he was advised by his attorneys to drop online, and so that's what he did. Now, I do want to say, Stephen did tell me at the time that Patricia was against him going public. I didn't find out until recently that Patricia was not against him going public, that Patricia actually helped him tweak his notes a little bit. So I don't know why it was that Stephen told me that Patricia was against him going public. I don't know if it was because he was trying to protect Patricia, but he did tell me that Patricia was actually against that. So I don't know if that was something that changed or how that went. So let's see here. Let me get. And I know this is long, guys. This is exhaustive, but I'm tired of answering questions, and I'm tired of accusations against me. I'm tired of churches not calling me back because they think I'm on one side or the other. I'm just getting it out, and then you guys can decide whether or not I'm blacklisted from the kingdom of God because I stood up for truth. So, I want to make it clear. I never took any testimonies. So there's this idea out there that I dug up testimonies and I took testimonies and I was an investigator. I never took any testimonies. If people came to me with a testimony, I sent them to Stephen. I didn't dig. And in the beginning, it was just Stephen taking testimonies. Later on, Rob was inserted and Rob took testimonies and I know that people did come to me and they said, hey, look, I'm a victim. And I never took those testimonies. I sent them. I'm not saying that I wouldn't have taken a testimony if there was nobody, but it just wasn't it's not what I was called to do. That wasn't what I was doing. And so I sent them to Stephen, and I think even later on, maybe I sent some people to Rob. I don't remember. But, in the end, everybody went to the investigator anyway. So let me get into David Hunter. So I want to say this, guys. Nobody's ever going to get me to denounce any of these guys as friends. That has been done along the way with different people where they think that I should denounce these people as friends in my life or brothers. You're never going to get that to happen from me. Stephen is a friend. I love him. David is a dear friend. I love him. And even though they don't agree on things and they're like this, that doesn't mean that I don't love them and I can't be friends with them. It's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. Listen to me. It's not going to happen. So, David was continually sought after for his testimonies. And of course David had testimonies. Of course he did. He had been part of Todd's life for years. And he had lots of information. But the thing that David hadn't told people was he had information on a lot of people. A lot of people. When you're behind the scenes, man, it's like you just see a lot of stuff. And like I said in the beginning, if you haven't watched from the beginning, you got to go back. Ministry, the business of ministry, the ministry that's behind the scenes is ugly. That's why I'm so sick and tired of it, man. I'm so sick and tired of it. I just want the kingdom of God. I want Jesus. I want his holiness, his righteousness, his grace, his joy, his love. I want that to be what we focus on, not this dumb stuff. I'm so tired of this. But anyway, they continually drilled David for his testimonies. Now, it's David's nature that he's not going to roll over on anybody. It's just against David's core belief system. He's not going to roll over on anybody. It's just not going to happen. And people didn't understand it, and people thought that he was covering up stuff, and maybe he was involved. And you know what? That's things that people need to take up with David. Don't take it up with me, because I don't know what David was involved in. I only know matter of fact, you know what? Here's the crazy thing. People seem to think that I know everything David knows. I find out the stuff that you know the same time David posted online. He doesn't tell me that stuff, and the reason is because he doesn't want me to have to defend him. I did not know that David was recording Stephen. I did not know that. So anyway, now I would tell you that there was a story that had involved David at one point that was originally in the report, and I think it continued to be in the report. And David asked repeatedly for that story not to be in the report because he didn't want his family in it. He didn't want his family involved. His kids were around, and he just didn't want that. And I was told that his story would not be in it, and when the report came out, the story was there. And I had to tell David that the story was there, and he flipped. He flipped. His wife flipped, and I think that was probably the first point where the foundation broke there. And he was very upset. He was told that story would not be included, and it was. So, at some point in there, David started to record Stephen's conversations. And why? It was because Stephen had kind of gotten the funny, I don't know if it's funny or not, but reputation of he's the guy that records you. And so David would ask, "Are you recording me?" And I guess that somewhere in the beginning, David felt like Stephen fumbled that reply, and he felt like he had been being recorded by Stephen. And so he started to record Stephen at that point. Again, I had no idea. I didn't know that he was recording Stephen until the day he dropped the recordings online. And that is the absolute truth. And I think probably David didn't tell me because he knew I would have told Stephen, because I love them both. And just like if I would have known that Stephen was recording David, I would have told David. So, again, danged if you do, danged if you don't. I can't make everybody happy. So, anyway, around this same time, we ended up getting word that Todd's inner staff hacked into Todd's computers and stole financial records and screenshots of sexual conversations. Can you guys grab my charger to my computer? Sorry, my computer's going dead. So anyway, it's probably going to go dead before they get there. But it's all right. I know most of this now. But anyway, I was told that people. Yeah, don't move that. Just go around. I was told that people from Todd's ministry had stolen financial records. Hold the light.
I'm worried about him falling off the top.
Had stolen financial records. Neil's like going behind trying to get out. Anyway, had stole financial records and sexual screenshots from Todd's computer illegally. Obviously, if it's stolen, then it's illegal. But what they did was they basically hacked in to Todd's computers and got all his sensitive data and information. And by the way, apparently financial records of giving going all the way back into the early 2000s is my understanding. And what they did was they went into a social media account and screenshot the conversations that he was having with females. Now, how that information got to Stephen, I'm not exactly sure. I don't know exactly how it got to Stephen. I'm trying to remember. I can't remember. But I warned Stephen at the time. I adamantly warned Stephen to please don't ever touch that information. Don't touch it. Don't let it come to you. Even if they offer it to you, don't take it, because I know that could be a legal issue, and I did not want Stephen to get caught up in some sort of legal issue. And I can't tell you today. I have no idea to this day who touched it, who didn't touch it. I have no idea. Stephen says that he never touched it. I know that David insists that he did touch it. I can't tell you who touched it. I have no idea. I know that Stephen told me he didn't, and I know that it was done. I know that it was done. So moving forward, I don't know. I have no idea where we are with that, because again, I wasn't on the inside of that situation for some time, and so I was on a kind of a need to know basis, and at that point, I was more of just a friend to Stephen and just advised him not to do it. And so that's where I was. So now that brings me up to basically, I'm just going to go to kind of early November, where things really started to take a really bad turn for me. In early November, I had stress-induced organ failure. So I was under extreme amount of stress from all this. Listen, through this process, people thought I was, some people were mad because I was on Stephen's side. Some people were mad because they thought I was on Todd's side. All these people are angry at me. I lost a partner. I lost almost every partner we had. Churches weren't inviting us back because they just wanted to, they wanted to see where everything landed or whatever. And my family, we had invested every dime that we had into the movie. And this thing robbed us of the best, should have been the best time of our life. Having our first movie go public, and it took the wind right out of our sails on that, and we're basically left bankrupt, and I was just sick. And I was hospitalized for 8 days. I had 2 surgeries. I had my gallbladder taken out. I had pancreatitis set in, and my blood pressure was through the roof, and just extremely sick, and it was just a really bad situation. And so at that point, I said, look, I can't be involved in this anymore. Let me see that in. I said I can't be involved anymore, and I've got to be out of this. I can't do it anymore. And unfortunately, at the time, that was very much seen as betrayal for a lot of people. A lot of people felt like that I had 100% betrayed Stephen, the process, betrayed everybody involved, and I just want to say that it wasn't betrayal. For me, taking care of my family was a priority. In order to take care of my family, I had to make sure that I was alive. And I know that there was a lot of things said. I had churches that were being contacted saying that I was now betraying Stephen, and so my last remaining churches basically pulled out on me at that point, and it's sad. It's really, really, really sad. It's weird because in reality, both sides of this thing have really sabotaged my ministry at one point. And I'm not saying Stephen did it or anybody in particular did it, because most of the time it's probably people that just think they know something and they don't know. I'm not saying that it was Stephen's. Well, I will tell you, Stephen was mad. He thought I did betray him. I don't think he thinks that now. But it is what it is. I didn't betray anybody. And that's just the way it is. In the end, here's the thing. I want to say this. I don't agree. I do not agree. There's some things, and I love David Hunter, absolutely, and David's really tried to cover me and been very gracious to me, and not throwing me under the bus and anything, because he knows where I really stood, the position I was in, that I was only trying to do what my part was. But anyway, I do believe there are victims. That is a point where I 100% disagree with people that say that there's not a victim. I believe there are victims. Now, in life there can be many kinds of victims. So some people are like, well, Todd didn't hold somebody down and force him to have sex. Well, I don't know what evidence was in there in the end game. I have no idea. But I can tell you that I heard testimonies and seen things in the very beginning where I'd say that there are victims. Now, there are different kinds of victims. There are victims that are physically victimized, and there are victims that are spiritually victimized. There are people that are mentally victimized. There are people that are spiritually victimized. Did I already say spiritually the first time? Maybe I did. Yes. But, and the thing is that I will continue to contend that if you are a spiritual leader over people and you use your spiritual authority to manipulate people, you have now participated in spiritual abuse. Now, you may disagree with me. You don't have to disagree with me. We can have disagreements. That's fine. I'll tell you this too, that I hope that people that were truly victimized get the help that they need, and I hope that the people that were just mad, because I don't think that everybody was a victim. I think that there probably are people that just had a bone to pick with Todd, and I hope that gets filtered out and sorted out, and I pray that the right people are in charge of doing it. Another thing I'll say is, when the stories came out about Rob Radowski, I don't know Rob very well. We've only met a couple times, and we've talked on the phone, a while, and I'll tell you, I told David this, and I've told other people this. I have a hard time believing that Rob threatened people into giving their testimonies. I do have a hard time believing that, But then again, my point is if David has that evidence that says that, then I say lay it out. It's hard for me to believe that Rob would do that. It's hard for me to believe that Stephen would do that. It just like it'd be hard for me to believe that David did it. I love all these guys. I don't want to believe the worst about any of them. I want to believe the best. But so I would say that my final thought is that 100%, I think Todd is guilty. I agree with the statement that was released by Dr. Brown. Now, do I agree with how the whole thing was done? No, I don't agree with how the whole thing was done. But I don't have to agree with it because it wasn't my fight. One of the things, the points that I try to make the entire time is this, is that I don't want to live and I don't want to minister in a world where you can just say whatever you want to say about somebody and they don't have a right to defend themselves. I'm going to stick by that. That's been my story the whole time. Stephen knows I felt that way. Rob knows I felt that way. Patricia knows I feel that way. David knows I feel that way. Todd knows I feel that way. I always felt like Todd should have an opportunity to defend himself. I don't know what that looks like. I'm not saying I have the answers of how that looks because, you know, if let's say my daughter was victimized, I wouldn't want her name given over as somebody who testified. So I don't know what the right answer is. That's why I said we needed people that were further up the totem pole that knows how to make these kind of decisions. I'm not saying that I'm the guy that can make that decision. I don't know the right answer, but I can tell you this. There's all kinds of things people can say about me from my past that I've repented of and that I've moved by, and I'm not that person anymore at all whatsoever. And I would hate to think that you could just go and dig up stuff that I did 10 years ago, 15 years ago, or 20 years ago, or whatever, and say that's who I am today and judge me by that when that's not who I am. Now, obviously, we know, excuse me, we know that there is a track record that was established that says that those things never stopped all the way up through 2019. And I don't know what those things are. I don't know. I'm not claiming to know. I have no idea. All I'm saying is there has to be a way that we cannot make this the standard of the future where we can just judge people for whatever we want and not give them an opportunity to defend themselves. Because I guarantee you that everybody watching this right now, there are things that people could say about you that if you didn't have the right to defend yourself, it would take you out of ministry or embarrass you in public or embarrass you in your church. We can't have that be the standard. I don't know what the answer is. I probably sound like a Democrat or something. I don't know what the answer is. I just know it ain't this. So, you know, the other thing I want to say is, look, I love Todd Bentley. He knows I love him. But I do think he's guilty. And I think he needs help. And I really, you know, and by the way, I can tell you this. I really think that Stephen loves Todd Bentley. And I think that Stephen really just thinks he needs help. Did Stephen make mistakes along the way? You better bet you did. He did, man. I guarantee he made mistakes, a lot of them. And we all make mistakes. And I can guarantee you that Stephen's probably going to repent for those mistakes. And he'll probably do it publicly, I hope. So, you know, so, guys, that's my story. And there's probably so much more I could have said, should have said, wanted to say. I'll probably think about it. And I wish I would have said that. But, you know, I don't even know what the point is. You know, it's such a rough thing to be involved in. It's such a rough thing. And I never pictured that I would lose my ministry because I was trying to seek out truth. I never thought that I would be in a position to where I was torn between friendships because, you know, of just stuff like this. You know, I never pictured a day where I would have to sit down and do a live stream like this. It just never occurred to me that this would ever happen. But, you know, I mean, we even had threats. We even had threats early on, different, you know, and I'm not going to get into all that, but, you know, people get crazy, you know, and I do want to mention, that speaking of threats, I do want to mention that there was a time in the beginning where it came up of why won't Stephen give the name of the accusers over to Todd. And I just want to say that even though you just heard me, I'm the guy that thinks he should be able to defend himself. I do want to say that stories were circulating, and not from Stephen. They did not come from Stephen. They came from people elsewhere. They came from people that were giving testimonies of being victims, where they said that Todd and his team were we're threatening them, intimidating them, and all this. And so people were basically like, look, we don't want our names given over as people that are testifying. So, gosh, I don't know what the right answer is, but you wouldn't want your kid's name being handed over so you could be intimidated. And I don't know whether or not that really even happened, because that was just a story that was being told to us. So I don't know. I can only hope that truth prevails, that truth comes out. But in the end, I know that it all comes out in the wash. It all comes out. So, in closing, guys, I love you guys. I pray that anybody that, you know, in the network of churches that have watched this, they see this, they see where I stand. I pray that people on both sides of the fence understand I love you guys. I love you all. I don't want to be here. I don't want to be in this situation. I try to walk away from it. This thing is a principality that tries to just drag you back in. I don't want to have anything to do with it, but truth needs to be told. It needs to be said. And there's a lot I probably should have said that I just didn't, but I don't even know how long I've been talking, probably an hour or more. But I love you all. And, you know, if you're a church and you want to have me in, contact me. If you want to give us a financial gift, and boy, we're really suffering now, you can. It's paypal.me/Derrick Gates. And there's a shameless plug. That's a shameless plug. But anyway, guys, I love you all. And I just pray that God has his way, that we can all just start acting a little more kingdom and love on each other a little bit more. And that, man, and by the way, we need more repentance. We need more restoration. We need more revival. And, you know, I just pray for the restoration of those that need it. And I pray for the revival fire to hit us all, and that we can start living from a place of joy and overflow and abundance in this time. Amen. I love you guys. Peace out and shalom.